Welcome to Becoming a Writer. My name is Atoma Eji. I'm so excited you guys are able to be on the show today. I have a special guest with us. His name is Rob Skinner. He has written this incredible book, 0 to 100, about the subtitle is An Essential Guide for Church Planters and Mission Teams. And if it is your desire to write a book one day, or to learn more about awesome brother Rob Skinner, he's going to share about that a little bit today. So if you like this episode, definitely subscribe and consider clicking like and maybe leaving a comment so it can kind of spread through the interwebs. As we go ahead and jump in, the first question I have for Mr. Rob Skinner is, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and also what inspired you to write 0 to 100?
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. It's a real privilege to be here talking to you. You know, it's when I think about my life, I've had a chance to plant a lot of different churches. Just being a Christian early on, I was given a chance to plant churches when I started at 25. And so I've pretty much done that ever since, whether in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, or even in Japan. I was there for 10 years. And I came back and I thought, I really want to pass on what God has given me. So many opportunities. And I love to plant churches. I planted a church in my hometown and it was awesome. And that was self-supporting. And so I had put together some material for a conference in the American Commonwealth region of our family of churches, the ICOC. And I thought, I need to put that down on paper. And it had always been on my Goddard list or my life list or bucket list to write a book. And so I decided I'm going to put everything I know about planting churches into one book. And that's what I did.
Okay. So how would you describe your writing process? So obviously you came up with this idea, you wanted to put, your thoughts into a book from your time in Japan and then planting churches here in the US. Can you share a little bit about your process from the idea to, this great book you put together?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great question because that's the tough part, is actually putting it all together. So I started, first of all, it was June of 2018. It's very hot here in Tucson, and it's a good time to write a book because you're inside a lot. It's usually about 110 degrees, 108. And so I decided, okay, for 3 hours a day, for the next 30 days, I'm going to dedicate to writing this book. I'm just going to finally get it done. I'm going to knock it out. And so I forced myself to treat it like a part-time job. And every day from 9 to 12, I would get up and then I would just do that. I wouldn't do anything else. I treated it in my mind as like, okay, this is separate from my regular ministry work, and I'm just going to concentrate. That helped me to really focus on that. And I kept a log and forced myself to write down how much I'd written, how many words every day. And then when I started, I wrote down an outline. I simply emptied my mind of everything that I could possibly think about church planting, and wrote down all the ideas. And then I tried to organize them when they, groups of thought together. So that became my outline. And then every day I would select a couple bullet points that I had outlined and say, okay, I'm going to write just about this. This is whether it's evangelism or whether it's forming a team or whether it's funding or finances, I'm going to write about that today. And I would force myself to sit there and write, usually around 1,000 to 1,500 words every day. Some days it didn't happen, but that was my process. And it worked. I was able to get it mostly done in about 30 days. And then it took about another 9 months before I was able to publish it.
So then you went through, like, in the 9 months without the editing process and kind of running it by different people, or what was the 9-month portion?
Well, that's a good question because, okay, first of all, I was like, writing it was one thing, but then I had no idea how to publish a book or what to do. And by the very nature of the book, I didn't think it's a very broad audience. Planting churches is a very small segment in terms of interest. It's not like I'm writing a Harry Potter book or something like that. I mean, even among the Christian reading community, that's a very small segment of people interested in church planting. And so I thought, how am I going to do this? And I really got stumped because I just didn't know. So I contacted Tony Mulholland at IPI Books, and he looked at it. He liked it, but I could sense from him that he too felt like it was just too narrowly targeted for what he wanted to do, and I totally understood. And so I was left with a decision of not publish it or self-publish it. And so that's when I looked into Amazon, and I got help from a guy named Joel Nagel, who leads the church in East Lansing, Michigan. And Joel is a true Renaissance man, very gifted technologically, and he helped me. He assisted me in walking through the process of formatting it and then getting a cover made and then publishing it. And so then we got it done last May 18th, right during the Look Up conference. We were there together, and he helped me to finally hit the button and publish it. It was awesome. But most of the 9 months was just, I wasn't really doing anything. I just was stumped as to know how to proceed. That's what I would say.
Okay. So I think that, and I so love what you put together. I know we had a chance to chat a little before we started recording the episode here, but I love what you put together, just in this book. And I think that, to me, what you did is you didn't just go from soup to nuts of do this, do that, do whatever, but you included like your life story, parts of that, in here, which made it a really awesome, enjoyable read. And I guess my question to you, because I think a lot of people have great stories, in our family of churches and, all over the place, but they just don't know how to get like their thought into a book. So I guess my question is, what advice do you have like for people that haven't even maybe thought about getting a book together, but I think it's important if they have lived a pretty interesting life, so to speak, or people that are aspiring authors, what advice would you have to those individuals?
Man, there's so much advice I'd give, but what I would say is one of the top 5 regrets of the aged is people regret not having expressed themselves and expressed their feelings when they get older. They wish they would have spoken up. And a lot of times we feel like our lives are boring compared to other people, and other people are smarter, other people's stories are more interesting, so we shouldn't share our story. And I finally had to come to grips with the fact it's a lie. And I've got a story that I should share. And it may not be someone else's story, but it's a story that is worthy of telling. And so I would recommend for people to simply write down some of the stories that are interesting to you. That, there's usually like 10 or, when you start thinking about it, there's a lot of stories. And start there. Start recounting some of those incidences in your life that are interesting and put it down. Now, is it going to sell 2 million? Probably not, unlikely, but it's going to impact somebody. And that's what I think. I think, okay, I'm not trying to make $1 million from my book, but I know I can help somebody by sharing my story. It's going to resonate with a few people. And people like you, thank you for having me on this. So I've had to kind of go, okay, just because I can't have a $1 million bestseller doesn't mean I can't put my story out there. And I would encourage people to overcome that fear, overcome the voice that tries to keep your expectations so low until you don't do it. You don't have time, you don't have this, your stories are boring. It's so far, every person's story is so interesting. That's why I've been enjoying doing a podcast, because people are fascinating. That's why I love doing ministry. I get to know people's lives. Everyone has a very interesting story.
Mm-hmm. So I know we had some different questions we had discussed, but I'm going to actually go off script a little bit. So let me know how you feel about this question. So I think since I've known you in the sense of followed you on, YouTube and different things like that, you seem like someone, and also read about you, you seem like someone who's got like a really disciplined morning routine. So can you share a little bit about that, like what your morning routine is, generally speaking?
Yeah, you know, your morning is like everything. Th- Basically, that's when I'm the sharpest, when I can think the most clearly. So between the time I wake up and 12 o'clock is like the most critical time. So my routine is I wake up at 6:30. I read my Bible from 6:30 to 7. This is my current routine. It changes. It depending on the situation, it'll change. From 7 to 7:30, I pray and meditate, and then from 7:30 to 8, I'll go out in the garage and I've got a pull-up bar and I'll do like 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups and do some planks. And then I've got a brother who's coming over at 8 every day and I'm training for ministry. And we're meeting every single day, 6 days a week, to train him for ministry. We go on a prayer walk around the neighborhood till 9. Then at 9, that's when I sit down and do my productive work. I typically will either record a podcast, write sermons. It's usually the heavy thinking. I've got to do it between 9 and 12. Once 12 hits, or actually more like 1 o'clock, I feel like my mind it's much more difficult to think in a very creative way. And so in the afternoon, I'll usually, 1 o'clock or so, have some food and then take like a 30-minute nap just to recharge, and then do another segment between like 3 to 6, where I do more like administration, phone calls. I'll practice my guitar, stuff that takes less thinking and creativity. So morning time is everything. I just feel like, man, if you can master your morning, then your life can totally change for the better.
That's awesome. Very helpful. Very helpful. So I know you mentioned podcast. You got the Rob Skinner podcast. I know you started in April, and you've had, I think, not this last episode, but the one right before that, you had Mike Fontenot from Australia, family of churches on, and I'm sure some other great guests. But can you tell us a little bit about your podcast? I think you kind of mentioned a little bit what inspired you, but maybe you can cover that in a little bit more detail and just kind of what your vision is for that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, I've got a dream to plant 10 churches in the next 10 years. I'm almost 55. I'll be 55 this year. I guess I've got 10 more years, until I'm 65. Maybe I'll retire. I don't know. But I want to make my life count. I want to do as much as I can. And so I thought, how can I do that? Well, I need to train young people. And I want to get in touch with young people that are eager to do, not just young people, but anyone who's really motivated to do ministry and missions. And so I'm trying to build a mission training center here in Tucson, where through the books that I write, through the podcasts that I have, I can train and equip disciples for missions, both here and then people who are listening or reading my books. And I love our churches. I love our family of churches, and I want them to grow dramatically. I want them to multiply. And so my vision was I want to do a podcast that interviews people that are making their life count and that are fired up for God, and that, don't want to, they want to live a life of no regrets. They want to pour it all out for God. And so that's what I thought. I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to learn how to do it so I can interview those people. And it's for their benefit, so people can learn from great people who are really ambitious spiritually, but also for me, so I can learn from them. How do you plant that many churches? I don't even know if it's possible, but I'm going to ask them. I'm going to try to learn. And it's kind of like a discipling time. Every time I ask people questions, and I want to provide my own material in the podcast. And so that's kind of the origin of it. Is I thought, okay, this is a way to serve the kingdom, help me grow, and make connections. I know I can't do it unless I'm connected to other strong people around the world. So that's the origin of the podcast. Yeah.
So last question. I know you wrote this one. This is your first book. And you mentioned just now that you're considering books. So I don't know if you can share anything about any thoughts you have on other books that you're thinking about in the future, or pretty much
Actually, I just wrote a book, and I'm hoping to publish it my goal is next Sunday. And so it's
You
a
heard
book
it
on,
here first.
that's right. It's a book on courage. It's called Courage. Courage, basically, it's all about how to make this life count. And I really believe that without courage, you can't get anything else done. Everything depends on the ability to overcome fear. And so I've written it, got it all done. I'm just working on formatting it. And then I've talked to Tony Mulholland, and hopefully it'll be published through IPI. And if not, it'll be self-published also. But I published the one last year in May. So I'm trying to publish one every year, at least for the next 10 years.
Wow, that's so inspiring. I definitely will be following a lot more of what you have going on your podcasts, and I'll look out definitely for the book that you have on courage.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us. Do you have anything else you wanted to share? Have I missed
There's
anything?
just one other thing. I think one of the challenges with writing, I feel like the biggest challenge is simply forcing yourself to start typing and forcing yourself to sit down and put things down on paper. And a book that I would strongly recommend, there's two books that I'd recommend to help you to overcome this. One is The Art of War. Not The Art of War, The War of Art.
Pressfield.
Okay, you've heard. And it's a great book on overcoming internal resistance and how much we fight doing the things that matter the most. The War of Art is a fantastic book on how to overcome resistance, especially when you want to write a book, but you feel like, I get distracted so easily, I never make the time. And another one is called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamont. And that's a very good book on similar and a little more comprehensive, but both are very good. So,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks so much for your time. We definitely will be checking you out on Amazon and through IPI Books. And I believe you're in Tucson, Arizona, correct?
Tucson, Arizona, exactly.
So we'll include the information in the show notes.
Thanks
so much for your time. If you guys enjoyed this episode, like I said, please subscribe and click like. And we'll be looking forward to our next episode. Thanks again.